Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
Everybody kind of starts at the same nucleus. That's not where creativity lives. Creativity lives in all the time it takes and all the experience you gather from doing this particular task over and over and over and over again, to where you start to find your method, to where you start to find your way of doing something. You also start to notice your brain at work. You start to notice when you piece away from the norm, when you stop asking for permission. Am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to break it? Am I allowed to grind it down to sand? Hi guys, welcome to The Unfiltered Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Ashley Pollard, and today I want to talk about what I call copycat syndrome. And copycat syndrome is typically something I see businesses, artists, anyone who has a hobby even start to feel at the beginning of a journey, or maybe just a little bit fresh to it. There's a stage in business, in art, in anything you're creating for yourself, that you start to wonder when you will have your own take. Am I creating something original? Am I creating something for others that is mine? And it's really hard to do in this day and age because there's really very little that's original. It's with these types of feelings that I want to remind you that being a beginner does sometimes mean copying. Now, I want to remind you there's a difference between copying and plagiarizing, taking as your own. Let's use a really good example like cooking. If my grandmother passes me a recipe, actually, if I find a recipe online of something, of let's say shrimp scampi, lemon pepper shrimp scampi, and I am trying to learn how to cook better and I'm trying to pick up new skills, and I find the recipe, I buy the goods, I buy all the equipment, and I go and prepare this dish. It is perfectly fine to use that recipe. It is perfectly fine to say what worked, what were the steps, what was the little tips and tricks that this person used to really make it their own. And she's given it to us as this recipe. So it's perfectly fine to follow that recipe to a T and serve it for dinner and tell others. It would be so different to say, yeah, guys, I've been really slaving away, trying to create a fresh take on shrimp scampi, and I'm so proud of what I created. You followed the recipe. That would be wrong. That's where we dip into plagiarism. Now, the difference is when you say, yeah, I got the recipe from so-and-so. She's brilliant at what she does. I really liked that she did this, this, and this. That would be you learning a technique. Now, there's a couple things I want to point out here because people are going to come for me here. Especially if they see a clip on social media, there's going to be something that they say, well, no, Ashley, copying is not okay. This is original work. Here's a really defining factor in how to understand if you're copying someone or not. One, did they give you the recipe? Is one of the biggest things to take away here. For instance, if I go to Half Baked Harvest, which is a website I love for recipes, she's giving me the recipe. Her business is giving me the recipe. Here's how to do it. But on top of that, here's some tips I learned from my family. Here's some tips I learned from someone who commented. She's sharing not only do this exactly, but also some tweaks that she's made from her own experience. I'm allowed to use that recipe. Now, granted, she's not in my home. She doesn't know if I'm setting that down on the table saying I whipped something up, but it would be really wrong for me to monetize that. And especially to monetize it with her stories, with her take, with similar graphics, with similar verbiage. That's plagiarism. That's full on copy, stealing from someone. Here's where I want you to start thinking about what you're allowed to do here is that if I found this recipe from Half Baked Harvest for lemon pepper shrimp scampi, which maybe she has on her website, maybe she doesn't. And then I went to Eno Garten's website, and then I went to Rachel Ray's website, and I went to this chef's website, this chef's website, this chef's website. And I tried all these shrimp scampis. I might have some opinions. I actually like the way they did that. I feel like this was too much sauce. I like the way she pulled in this ingredient. You do enough of something, you start to have a perspective. You start to have an opinion. And over time, maybe I stop cooking shrimp scampi and I start cooking fried chicken. And so now I wanted to pick something completely different. So now maybe I'm doing the same thing with fried chicken. I'm trying hers, I'm trying hers, I'm trying hers, I'm trying hers. And now I have not only an opinion on fried chicken, but I might also have an opinion about cooking that goes back to my shrimp scampi recipe and also changes that. So I'm creating a world of opinions from taking things that people have given me, following their literal recipe to learn the craft. The biggest takeaway is they gave me the recipe. What I don't believe is correct, what I do believe is not okay, is when someone is very clearly not giving you their recipe. I have a friend of mine who's a brilliant artist, and she is so creative in her conceptual design, in her campaigns, in her marketing efforts. It is so specific and unique and rare and beautiful. And there are people online who then will do the exact same thing. Obviously not as well, because there's only one original, but people will do the exact same thing. And if she went online and said, here's how to create a marketing concept similar to what I did, or, submit your own piece so that we could have contests, that might be different. She's encouraging people to take her concept and make it their own. But that is not what she was doing. She was not giving you the keys to the kingdom. For instance, I'm another good example. I am giving you the keys to the kingdom. I'm saying, take it all. I've said it many times on podcasts. I've said it to my audience. I've said it on Instagram. If this is the first time you've ever been in my space, know that anything I give you, you can take, you can learn, you can use it with your clients. Now, I made that clear right now. I continue to make it clear. I will continue to make that clear, because the way that I view our relationship here, you and I, is that you're learning a skill and I'm giving you the recipe. Very important distinction. For instance, there's people who come to me and they say, by the way, strategy sprints are a great example. It's a service that I offered for a while. I never saw anybody doing anything called a strategy sprint, and I ran it very specifically. There's a very specific, you do this 1, 2, 3, 4-step system. Someone came to me and said, by the way, somebody from your membership who's no longer in the membership is offering the exact same service. Same price, same deliverables, same order. Does that upset you? I think I'd be upset, is what they said to me. And I said, absolutely not. I'm 0% upset about that. The reason for that is because if she studied what worked for me, if she studied the work I do, if she was paying in the doers, if she joined a group program, even if she didn't pay me anything, there's so much out there to learn from me. I hope you do. On the flip side, it's probably not going to work. It's probably not going to work to copy me verbatim. We may not have the same audiences. We may not have the same background, the same mission, the same values, the same stories. You may not have the expertise that I do to sell things the way that I sell them, because there's a lot of nuance you guys don't see. So there's one side of me that says, please, and I hope it makes you a lot of money. On the other side, I know this is step one in her copying journey, where she has to kind of replicate, and then she will adapt into her own over time. I kind of did this myself at the beginning. I was charging $40 for calls. I ran a group program the way I was told to run a group program from a close friend of mine. She said, this is how you do a group program. And I followed the method. And then I changed it, adapted, made it my own. And now I have the business that I have. So what I want you to think about here is that I want you to copy. And I don't want you to copy in the way that you think, where I say, screenshot someone's Instagram post and exactly replicate it. But what I want you to do is copy concepts. If there's someone that you follow, you can study their social media goals. You can study their social media presence. For instance, we recently did this where we took a look at 5 different brands. What did they post every single day for 2 weeks? And we followed it. And we noticed this is the cadence. This is what they're doing. This is what it looks like. This is what it encompasses, to kind of learn what their game is. Now, if we said, okay, let's take a look at this one particular brand and follow it exactly, it wouldn't work for us. It would be a good starting point to quote unquote copy that, but we would have to adapt it to our own to make it really work. Instead, what we did is we took these 5 and we tried to understand Are there concepts we're missing? Are there strategies at play that you can notice when sticks are stacked on top of each other? Is there a common ground that we're noticing? Not necessarily even for us to learn from it, but as much as it was like to see if we were missing something, or also to make sure that we have a finger on the pulse at all times. So I'm pro quote unquote copying, but they have to be giving you the equation. If you're posting publicly on social media, then I feel like I have the right to say, okay, so they mainly post on stories. They don't really post reels, and that's working for them. I wonder who their audience is. I wonder what their KPIs are. I wonder if there's something I can learn from this to bring into my business. Versus at 7:22 a.m., they posted this story. It had a white background. This was the spacing of the letters. It's not going to do much for you. Learn from people versus verbatim taking what they're doing. It's just not going to work for you. Now, I want to give you an exercise that I think is incredibly valuable. Every time I do this exercise with people, it blows their mind. And what's funny is that I actually learned this when I was very, very young from an art teacher. I really want you to think of this as homework. Find a time on the calendar where you can do this. Every person who does this, it drives them crazy. I do this sometimes. It drives me crazy. And what I want you to do is I want you to take a piece of lined paper and I want you to number it 1 through 100. When you have that paper lined 1 through 100, I want you to find 100 ways you can use a brick. Sounds crazy. 100 ways to use a brick. Why would I want 100 ways to use a brick? What this exercise is going to show you is that the beginning is going to be very obvious. You might say, I want to paint something on it and use it as decor. I want to use it to keep a door open. I want to use it as a paperweight or something like that. I don't want to give you all the answers. As you start to evolve it, you'll notice that it's like, okay, I want to break it into pieces and do this. I want to stack it with to build something, or you have to start getting a little creative with it. But when you get to about 50 is where you're going to really see your creativity come to life. Maybe you want to grind it into sand and use it for something. Maybe you want to gift it to someone to place in a sidewalk as a memorial. And what you'll notice with this exercise is that, or what I notice as somebody who routinely does this exercise with others, is that 1 through 10, almost everybody have the same. Then when you get to like 10 to 30, they start to get a little creative, but there's still a decent amount of overlap. 30 to 50 is where it starts getting pretty different. And what's very fun, if you do this in an intimate group of maybe 5 to 10 people, is that 50 to 100, you may not see the same answers. Very little overlap. And this is where you're going to notice people really differ from each other. And you almost think of it like a cluster that starts to expand out, or a drop in the water that starts to expand out. Everybody kind of starts at the same nucleus. That's not where creativity lives. Creativity lives in all the time it takes and all the experience you gather from doing this particular task over and over and over and over again, to where you start to find your method, to where you start to find your way of doing something. You also start to notice your brain at work. You start to notice when you piece away from the norm, when you stop asking for permission. Am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to break it? Am I allowed to grind it down to sand? You also start to notice like all the opportunities of things that you can do with something so crazy as a brick. So I want you to try that exercise, and I want you to think about how that relates. And again, I cannot make it more clear. Do not quote unquote copy or plagiarize anybody, especially if they have not given you permission to do so. I have given you permission. Anybody educating online is giving you permission. If they're telling you, please go do this thing, they're giving you permission. So when you think, I want you to do this exercise, and I want you to come back and think about your evolution. What stage do you think you're at? Are you in 1 to 10 where you're doing exactly the same thing as everyone else? Of course, the space is going to feel saturated. It's saturated with other people who haven't yet found their way. And when you want to be one of the best in your game, when you want to be highly regarded, when you want to be highly respected, maybe you don't want to compete at all. You just want to make sure that you do good work that pays you good money. you need to start separating yourself out from other people. And sometimes it just takes time. It just takes experience. But if you want to be on the fringe, if you want to push yourself, what I highly recommend that you do is think about what is everybody doing from 1 to 30, and then get creative within your own business to shift 30, 31, 32 out to 50 and beyond. That is where the real magic lies. I hope this got you thinking a little bit about early stages of anything. I would not, I'm restarting the piano, which I played for years. And I have to remember how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. I have to remember how to play A Whole New World, which I used to know perfectly with both hands on the piano. I didn't write those songs, but I won't become good enough or skilled enough to play an original, which isn't really a goal, but to play an original or to write an original if I don't build the skill set from something that's established and already there. I really hope this made you think. I hope that you leave a comment on Instagram to kind of give me some feedback. Shoot me a message or tag me on Threads. I love living over there, and I'm definitely trying to be my most authentic self there. Not even trying to be, I want a space in the Instagram world that isn't so buttoned up. And that's kind of been Threads for me. So make sure to kind of tag me on whatever the thoughts this makes you think, because I'd love to see it. And I'll catch you next time on the next episode of The Unfiltered Entrepreneur.